The heavy oak doors of the grand sanctuary offered no barrier to the words that shattered Elora's world. Inside, the man she loved, Alpha King Alden, who had sworn a sacred blood oath to her under the crescent moon, stood before the gathered high lords. Hand in hand with Lady Vivian of the Southern Reach, his voice rang out, clear and unyielding. To secure our borders and unite our bloodlines, I present to you the future Luna of Solaria. The court erupted in cheers. Behind the heavy velvet tapestry, Elora let go of the healing draught she had spent 3 sleepless nights brewing to cure his battle wounds. It shattered silently against the stone. He had traded her love for a political alliance. In that moment of crushing betrayal, Elora did not weep, nor did she storm the hall. She made a choice. If Alden wanted a kingdom without her, she would give him exactly that. She would disappear forever. The embers in the hearth of the royal library cast long, weeping shadows across the stone walls. Elora stood by the high window, her gaze fixed on the courtyard below, where the banners of the Southern Reach fluttered alongside the royal crest of Solaria. A heavy, familiar step echoed in the corridor. The door swung open, and Alden entered. He still wore his ceremonial armor, his crown of dark iron and silver sitting heavily upon his brow. He looked every bit the Alpha King, imposing, breathtaking, and utterly unreachable. When his golden brown eyes found hers, a flicker of guilt crossed his rugged features, replaced quickly by the cold mask of a ruler. "Elora," he began, his voice low and gravelly. He closed the distance between them, reaching out a hand. "I see you heard the announcement." She stepped back, her movement fluid but deliberate. The space between them felt like a chasm. "I did. The whole kingdom heard it, Your Grace." Alden flinched at the formal title. "Do not call me that. Not in private. You knew the pressure the council was placing on me. The Southern Reach controls the only mountain passes through which the shadow beasts are invading. Without their army, Solaria will fall. I had to secure the alliance, and the price of that alliance was my heart," Elora said, her voice remarkably steady despite the hollow ache opening beneath her ribs. "We swore a blood oath, Alden. We promised that when the war ended, we would stand together. You told me the crown meant nothing without me. It was a dream, Elora. A beautiful dream we had before the war tore our borders apart," Alden said, his temper flaring, a defense mechanism against his own shame. He stepped closer, his aura as an alpha bearing down on the room, though she refused to bow to it. "Vivian will be Luna in name and duty. She understands the political game. But you are my soul. Nothing changes between us. I will build you a grand estate on the Whisper Cliffs. You will want for nothing. I will visit you every week. A shadow consort?" A bitter, elegant smile touched Elora's lips. "You want me to live in a gilded cage, waiting for the scraps of your time while another woman wears the ring you promised to me? You want the strategist who rebuilt your army to become a dirty secret hidden in the cliffs? It is the only way to keep you safe," Alden roared, his hands gripping her shoulders. His touch, once a source of warmth, now felt like iron shackles. "Lord Raymond, Vivian's father, demanded your exile. He knows how much influence you have over me, over the military. He wants you gone. If I do not marry Vivian and keep you hidden, his faction will seek to destroy you. I am protecting you, Elora." Elora looked into the eyes of the man she had loved since they were children running through the wild forests. She saw his fear, his desperate attempt to justify his cowardice under the guise of duty. He truly believed he could have both. The kingdom secured by Vivian, and his conscience comforted by keeping Elora as a plaything on the outskirts. "You are not protecting me, Alden. she whispered, raising her hands to gently peel his fingers off her shoulders. You are protecting your crown, and in doing so, you have already lost me. Alden's eyes darkened, the gold in his irises flaring with a dangerous, possessive light. You belong to this pack. You belong to me. I will not let you leave Solaria, Elora. The guards have orders. You will remain in the castle until the wedding is finalized. He turned on his heel, his heavy cape sweeping behind him as he marched out of the library, the heavy iron lock clicking into place from the outside. He had imprisoned her. Elora stood in the silence of the library, the betrayal settling deep into her bones. She closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of old parchment and dried lavender. Alden thought he knew her because he had grown up with her. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. She was the chief tactician of Solaria. She had designed the very security protocols of this castle. If he wanted to make her a prisoner, he would find out just how fragile his cage really was. But as she touched her lower abdomen, a sudden wave of nausea washed over her, accompanied by a faint, fluttering warmth she had tried to ignore for weeks. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach. Her breath hitched. She didn't need a medical kit to know. Her healer's instinct, combined with the subtle shift in her internal energy, confirmed the truth. She was carrying his child. If she stayed, Lord Raymond and Vivienne would surely discover the pregnancy. A bastard child of the Alpha King, especially one carrying the pure royal bloodline, would be a direct threat to Vivienne's future heirs. They would poison her, or worse, take the child from her. A cold resolve washed over Elora. She had to leave, not just for her dignity, but for the survival of her unborn child. The midnight rain lashed against the stone battlements of Castle Solaria, washing away the tracks of those who moved in the dark. Elora stood in the shadow of the western armory, dressed in a dark, waterproof cloak. She carried only a single leather satchel containing her tactical journals, her mother's silver signet ring, and a collection of rare, life-saving herbs. She had spent the last 2 hours bypassing the guard rotations she had memorized, exploiting a 20-second blind spot near the old drainage grates. You really are going through with this, a low voice whispered from the darkness of the archway. Elora did not flinch. She had been expecting him. From the shadows stepped Logan, her foster brother and the captain of the Northern Watch. He had a look of profound sorrow on his scarred face, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He will hunt you to the ends of the earth, Elora, Logan warned, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. The Alpha's bond is a tether. He will feel your absence like a missing limb. Let him search, Elora said softly. By the time he realizes I am gone, the trail will be washed away by the storm. Logan, you cannot tell him anything. If you love me, you must let me go. Logan closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his conflicting loyalties. He is my king, Elora. But he is a fool. He has traded a diamond for a piece of polished glass. Where will you go? Where the crown cannot reach, she replied. She did not give him a specific location. Protecting him from the mind-link interrogation Alden would undoubtedly subject his commanders to once the panic set in. She stepped toward the entrance of the ancient catacombs. But before she could slip inside, a sharp, metallic clang echoed from the eastern wing of the castle, followed by the urgent, rhythmic tolling of the alarm bell. Logan's head snapped up, his posture instantly shifting to that of a warrior. That's not the alarm for an escape. That is the warning for an assassin infiltration. Elora's tactical mind immediately calculated the variables. The southern reach. Lord Raymond's personal guard had arrived only yesterday. If Raymond wanted to ensure Alden's complete dependence on his alliance, what better way than to stage an attack, save the king, or perhaps weaken him just enough to force his hand? Go, Elora urged Logan. Your duty is to the defense. And you? I am already dead to this place, she said. But her instincts screamed at her. She couldn't leave him completely unprotected. Using the catacomb passage that ran parallel to the king's private chambers, Elora moved like a ghost through the dusty, narrow corridors. She peeked through a concealed spy hole behind a portrait of the first king. Inside the chamber, two cloaked figures with the emblem of the Southern Reach were silently replacing Alden's night chalice with another, identical vessel. Poison. If Alden drank it, he would be bedridden, entirely at the mercy of Vivian's family. Elora felt a pang of intense grief. He had betrayed her, but she could not watch him die. Slipping a blowpipe from her sleeve, a tool she had confiscated from a foreign spy months ago, she aimed through the narrow slit of the spy hole. A single tiny dart dipped in a sleeping serum struck the lead assassin in the neck. He collapsed instantly. The second assassin turned in panic, but Elora pulled a lever, releasing a heavy iron grate that sealed the chamber door from the outside, trapping him within the room just as the royal guards began to storm the hallway. On the table, she left a single, pristine white feather, her personal tactical calling card. It was a message to Alden. I could have killed you. Instead, I saved you. And now, I am gone. Turning away from the spy hole, Elora fled into the deep darkness of the catacombs, leaving her past, her love, and her home behind as she stepped out into the freezing, rain-drenched wilderness. 2 years later, the Grey Ridge was a jagged, unforgiving expanse of peaks and dense pine forests. A lawless border territory where neither the Lycan kingdom of Solaria nor the Southern Reach held sway. It was a place for outlaws, mercenaries, and those who wished to be forgotten. In a secluded cabin nestled against the side of a misty ravine, Elora sat by a wooden table, watching her son, Leo, play with a set of hand-carved wooden blocks. He was nearly 2 years old, with soft curls of dark hair and striking, intelligent silver-blue eyes that were a mirror image of the father he would never know. Elora had built a new life here under the name Reyna. To the locals and the mercenary bands that frequented the valley, she was known as the Ghost of the Grey Ridge, a brilliant, anonymous strategist and healer who sold tactical battle plans and miracle cures to those who could afford her steep prices and offered them for free to the refugees fleeing the endless border wars. She had survived. She had thrived. Her heart was a fortress, sealed shut against the memories of the king who had broken it. "Mama, look," Leo giggled, holding up a block. "Big castle." "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Elora smiled, her eyes softening as she kissed his forehead. The maternal warmth she felt for him was the only light in her otherwise quiet, guarded existence. A sharp, rhythmic knock on the heavy wooden door shattered the peace of the evening. It was the emergency signal. Elora instantly moved Leo into the hidden subfloor compartment beneath the hearth, a safety measure she had designed. "Stay quiet, my little wolf. Do not make a sound until Mama calls you." The boy nodded solemnly, clutching his wooden block. Elora slid the floorboard shut, threw a heavy rug over it, and slipped a silver-plated dagger from her sleeve, concealing it behind her back. She opened the door just a crack. The cold wind brought the scent of copper, wet pine, and a scent that made her entire body freeze. A scent of winter frost and burning cedar. Standing on her porch were 3 heavily cloaked figures. The leader pulled back his hood, revealing a face lined with deep exhaustion and new scars. It was Logan, Reyna. Logan breathed, his voice trembling with a mixture of relief and desperation. "They told me the Ghost of the Ridge lived here. I prayed to the ancestors it was you." "Logan," Elora whispered, her eyes widening. "You shouldn't have come here. How did you find me? I didn't search for you to drag you back." Logan said, stepping aside to reveal the two warriors behind him. They were carrying a crude wooden stretcher. Upon it lay a man wrapped in blood-soaked wolf furs, his skin a horrific, deathly gray, his veins turning black beneath his collar. "The king," Logan said, his voice cracking. "The southern reach betrayed us. Lord Raymond poisoned him with a black-veined plague to seize the regency. He has been in a fever for 3 weeks. The royal healers have given up. In his delirium, he has called for only one person. He called for you, Elora. Please, he is dying." Elora looked down at the stretcher. The mighty Alpha King Alden looked frail, his breathing shallow and rattling. But what caught her breath was his hand. Even in his deep, pain-riddled unconsciousness, his right fist was clenched tightly around a filthy, worn, and blood-stained white feather. He had kept it for 2 years. The past she had buried so deeply came roaring back, threatening to drown her in a wave of unresolved pain and lingering, unwanted love. The scent of winter frost and burning cedar filled the small cabin, a fragrance Elora had spent 2 years trying to scrub from her memory. Now, it was thick, choked with the metallic tang of blood and the sour, rotting odor of the black-veined plague. "Get him onto the table," Elora commanded, her voice dropping into the cool, authoritative register she had once used when directing field hospitals. Logan and the 2 warriors lifted Alden's heavy, shivering frame from the wooden stretcher, placing him onto the long oak dining table. Alden groaned, a low, animal sound of pure agony. His dark iron crown was gone, his hair was matted with sweat, and the skin of his face was paper-thin, showing the dark, spider-webbing lines of the poison creeping up his neck. "Keep watch at the perimeter," Elora told the 2 warriors, not wanting any more Solarian eyes inside her home than necessary. Once they slipped back out into the rain, she turned to Logan. Her gaze flicked toward the hearth, where her son remained silent beneath the floorboards. "And you. Not a word about the child. If you speak of him, if you even look at the hearth when Alden wakes, I will leave you both to the wolves." Logan nodded, his expression solemn. "You have my word, Elora. I only want to save our king. The Northern Watch. We are loyal to him, but we are loyal to you too. We never forgot what you did for the pack." Elora didn't answer. She pulled back her sleeves, her hands steady as she examined the black veins on Alden's neck. The poison was sophisticated, an alchemical blend of nightshade, crushed obsidian moss, and a dark magic binder. It was designed to keep the victim in a state of suspended agony, draining their life force while keeping them conscious enough to feel their body shutting down. "The Southern Reach doesn't just want him dead," Elora muttered, her fingers pressing against his burning pulse point. "They want him to suffer. They want him bedridden while they strip Solaria of its defenses. Lord Raymond's mages designed it," Logan said, his teeth gritted. "They claimed it was a plague from the wildlands, but we found the vials in Vivian's personal chambers. By then, the king was already failing. We had to smuggle him out of the capital before Raymond could declare himself regent." Elora reached for her leather satchel, pulling out a small glass vial containing a silver, viscous liquid, celestial hemlock. It was an incredibly rare countertoxin, highly volatile. In the wrong dosage, it was instantly lethal. But in a precise 1-to-5 ratio with pure spring water, it could neutralize the rot. "Hold him down," she ordered Logan. As Elora approached with the silver draft, Alden's eyes suddenly flew open. They were bloodshot, the golden brown irises clouded with a feverish haze. He didn't see her. He was looking through her, trapped in the nightmares of his delirium. "Elora," he choked out, his voice a broken whisper, completely stripped of his usual alpha authority. Elora, don't let them. The white feather. Where is she? Her hand trembled slightly, the silver liquid sloshing against the glass. She forced herself to breathe, burying the sharp spike of grief deep within her fortress of resolve. He is just a patient, she told herself. Nothing more. Hold his head, Logan, she said, her voice freezing over. She pressed her thumb against Alden's jaw, forcing his mouth open, and poured the cold silver mixture down his throat. Instantly, his body convulsed. His back arched off the table, his muscles locking in a violent spasm. Logan struggled to keep him pinned. It's working, Elora muttered, watching the black veins on his neck begin to writhe like living shadows beneath his skin. The silver is fighting the rot. But we need to bleed the dead magic out. She took her silver-plated dagger, slicing a shallow, precise line across his forearm. Black, sludge-like blood began to ooze from the wound, dripping onto the wooden floor. Suddenly, Alden's left hand shot out. His grip was shockingly fast, his fingers locking around Elora's wrist. The heat radiating from his skin was blinding. He stared up at her, the haze in his eyes clearing for a fraction of a second. You, he whispered, his grip tightening. It wasn't the grip of a dying man. It was the possessive, desperate hold of an alpha who had finally found what he was hunting for. You came back. Let go, she said coldly, refusing to let him see the tremor in her voice. Before she could pull away, a sudden, blinding flash of violet light erupted from the wound on his arm. A sharp, electrical shock traveled up Elora's hand, throwing her back a step. The black blood dripping onto the floor began to hiss, forming a shifting, runic pattern in the wood. Elora's tactical mind immediately recognized the magical signature. A tracking tether, she gasped, her eyes widening. The poison was bound to his bloodline. The moment the silver neutralized the magic, the caster was alerted. They know exactly where he is. Logan drew his sword, his face pale. How long do we have? If Raymond's mages are using standard portal relays. Elora looked toward the dark window, where the rain was starting to clear. Less than 12 hours. We have to break the tether now, or this cabin becomes our grave. Breaking a blood tether required more than just physical medicine. It required a soul filter ritual, an ancient, forbidden magic that Elora had studied during her years as the chief tactician of Solaria. It was a process that temporarily connected the healer's mind to the patient's dreamscape, allowing the healer to identify and sever the anchor of the curse. Are you sure about this? Logan asked, his voice laced with worry as he watched Elora prepare the ritual circle. She had drawn a circle of crushed lavender and salt around the table where Alden lay, his breathing now slower, though still shallow. The mind link is dangerous. If his mind is too fractured, you could get trapped in his delirium. I have survived worse than his mind. Elora said, her voice hard. She sat on a wooden stool beside Alden's head. She placed her hands on either side of his temples. His skin was still burning, but the black veins had stopped spreading, held in check by the silver draft. Closing her eyes, Elora breathed in the scent of cedar and frost, letting her consciousness slip past the physical boundaries of her body. The transition was violent. She was pulled into a cold, dark void, the sound of howling wind and clashing swords ringing in her ears. She found herself standing in a shattered version of the Grand Sanctuary. The oak doors were splintered, the tapestries torn to shreds. In the center of the ruined hall sat Alden, draped in heavy iron chains that bound him to a throne made of sharp, jagged obsidian. Shadows with glowing red eyes, the representation of the Southern Reach's curse, were slowly wrapping around his throat, whispering poison into his ears. You threw her away, the shadows hissed. You are a weak king. You traded your soul for a crown of ashes. Die here, Alden. Let Solaria fall. Alden's dream self did not fight them. He sat with his head bowed, his eyes hollow. But in his hand, he clutched a single, pristine white feather. It was the only light in the entire dark landscape, glowing with a soft, protective warmth that kept the shadows from completely consuming his heart. Alden, Elora called out, her voice echoing through the ruined sanctuary. His head snapped up. The hollow look in his eyes vanished, replaced by a raw, desperate hope. Elora? No. This is another trick. The poison is mocking me. It's not a trick, she said, stepping forward. The shadows hissed at her approach, recoiling from the silver light radiating from her dream self. I am here to break the tether. You need to let go of the chains, Alden. You need to fight. I cannot, he whispered, his voice cracking with a deep, systemic grief. They told me you were dead. I sent scouts to the Whisper Cliffs, to the northern borders. They found nothing but a torn cloak in the river. I thought my cowardice had killed you. If you are gone, Elora, let the shadows take me. I do not want the crown. Elora stopped a few feet from him, her heart aching despite her anger. To see the proud, unyielding Alpha King so utterly broken, reduced to a weeping shell of a man, was a sight she had never anticipated. I am alive, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of 2 years of silence. But I did not survive, so you could die here. Solaria needs its king, and I will not let you die in my home. She reached out, her fingers wrapping around the iron chains. The dark magic burned her hand, but she ignored the pain, channeling her healer's light into the metal. The silver light flared, cracking the obsidian throne and shattering the chains into dust. The shadows shrieked, dissolving into the darkness as the dreamscape began to crumble. Elora, wait! Alden cried out, reaching for her as the light began to pull them apart. Don't leave me again, please. Elora opened her eyes, gasping for air as her consciousness slammed back into her physical body. She fell back from the stool, her hands raw and blistered from the ritual. On the table, Alden let out a long, deep breath. The black veins on his neck began to fade, retreating back into his skin, leaving only faint gray scars. His breathing became deep and even. The fever had broken. Elora slumped against the wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had done it. She had saved him. You did it, Logan breathed, running to her side. He's breathing normally. The tether is broken. We aren't safe yet, Elora whispered, her eyes heavy. The mages will still know the approximate location where the tether was severed. We have to move him before sunrise. But her body was spent. The magical strain of the ritual had drained her reserves. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way, and she collapsed into a deep, dreamless sleep on the floor. Hours passed. The rain outside stopped completely, leaving a quiet, misty dawn. Inside the cabin, the floorboard beneath the hearth creaked. A small, dark head peeked out. Leo, tired of the dark and quiet, crawled out from his hiding spot. He walked over to the table, his little silver-blue eyes wide with curiosity as he stared up at the giant man sleeping there. Alden's eyes fluttered open. The fever was gone, his mind completely clear. He sat up slowly, his body aching but healed. He looked down, and his heart stopped. Standing by the table, clutching a wooden block, was a little boy. A boy with dark, unruly curls, a familiar stubborn jaw, and eyes that were the exact, striking shade of silver blue as his own. Alden stared at the child, his breath catching in his throat. The world seemed to stop spinning. The physical resemblance was too striking to ignore, but it was the instinctual pull in his blood, the deep, ancient resonance of the Alpha line. that confirmed the truth. "Elora," he whispered, his voice trembling as he looked from the boy to the woman, sleeping deeply against the far wall. He slid off the table, his legs slightly shaky but holding his weight. He knelt before the little boy, keeping his movements slow so as not to scare him. "Who are you, little one?" Leo didn't run. He tilted his head, his silver blue eyes studying Alden with an intelligence far beyond his 2 years. "I, Leo," he said proudly, holding up his wooden block. "Look, big castle." Alden's throat tightened, a sudden wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm him. He reached out a hand, his fingers hovering just inches from the boy's soft curls, not wanting to touch him without permission. "Leo, you have a beautiful castle. Step away from my son." The voice was cold, sharp as a razor, cutting through the morning silence. Alden looked up to see Elora standing by the wall, her posture rigid, her hand resting on the hilt of the silver dagger at her waist. Her eyes were filled with a fierce, protective fury that made even his inner wolf want to submit. "Elora," Alden said, standing up slowly. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "He has my eyes. He has my blood. Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you?" Elora laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the small cabin. She walked over, stepping directly between Alden and Leo, shielding the boy with her body. "When should I have told you, Your Grace? Before or after you locked me in the library? Before or after you announced your marriage to the Southern Reach? Or perhaps I should have sent a letter to your grand estate on the Whisper Cliffs, asking permission from your future Luna to raise your child in the shadows." Alden flinched as if struck. The guilt that had plagued him for 2 years reared its head, heavy and suffocating. "I did what I thought I had to do to save Solaria. Raymond's faction had us cornered. If I didn't agree to the marriage, they would have opened the passes to the shadow beasts. They would have destroyed us. I was trying to protect you by making me a prisoner." Elora stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper so Leo wouldn't be frightened. "By turning the woman who rebuilt your armies into a kept secret? You did not protect me, Alden. You protected your pride. You assumed I was weak enough to accept a life of gilded slavery. I am a strategist. I do not play secondary roles in another woman's court. I never married her," Alden said, his voice cracking with desperation. He took a step toward her, his golden brown eyes pleading. "Elora, listen to me. I never touched Vivian. I never completed the mate bond. For 2 years, I stalled the council, refusing to sign the final marriage treaty. I spent every single day searching for you. Why do you think Raymond poisoned me? He realized I would never make Vivian my Luna. He realized I would rather let the kingdom fall than forget you." Elora froze. Her mind, usually so quick to calculate every variable, struggled to process his words. "He never married her?" "It's true, Elora," Logan said, stepping into the cabin from the porch, his face grim. "The king has lived in a self-imposed exile within his own castle. He broke the treaty 3 weeks ago, declaring that he would rather face Raymond's armies than seal the union. That is why Raymond struck." Elora looked at Alden, seeing the truth in his exhausted, scarred face. The anger that had fueled her for 2 years suddenly felt heavy, mixed with a confusing, painful ache. But before she could speak, a sudden, violent tremor shook the cabin. The warding runes she had placed on the perimeter shattered with a sound of breaking glass. Outside, a deep, mocking voice boomed through the mist, amplified by magic. "Alpha King Alden, by order of the Council of Solaria and the High Regent Lord Raymond, you are under arrest for treason against the Alliance. Surrender the witch who harbors you, or we will burn this forest to ash." Logan rushed to the window, his hand on his sword. "They're here. Lord Raymond's personal guard. There are at least 50 of them, Elora. We're surrounded." Elora's survival instincts instantly took over, the shock of Alden's revelation locked away for later. She looked at her son, then at the weakened king who had just returned to her life. "We don't surrender," she said, her silver eyes flashing with a cold, lethal resolve. "Logan, get the weapons. Alden, if you want to prove you've changed, you will do exactly what I say." The scent of burning wood and sulfur pierced the damp morning air as Lord Raymond's forces began launching flaming arrows into the clearing. The dry thatch of Elora's roof caught instantly, sending black smoke billowing into the gray sky. "The wind is blowing from the east at a rate of roughly 1 to 2 relative to our escape path," Elora said, her voice a cool, calculating anchor amidst the rising panic. She adjusted the heavy leather harness across her chest, securing Leo tightly against her heart. She wrapped a thick, damp woolen blanket around her son, shielding him completely. "We cannot fight 50 warriors in an open clearing. We must force them into the ravine." Alden stepped forward, his eyes blazing with a protective, primal fury. "I will take the vanguard. My strength is returning, Elora. I can hold the line while Logan guides you down the cliff." "No," Elora countered sharply, locking eyes with him. "You are still recovering from a lethal poison, Alden. If you overexert your core, your heart will fail. We do not fight with brute strength today. We fight with the terrain." She reached into her satchel, pulling out 3 small glass flasks filled with a dense gray powder, crushed wolfsbane and dried puffball fungus. "Logan, take the western ridge. When they enter the tree line, shatter these against the rocks. The wind will carry the spores directly into their ranks. It won't kill them, but it will blind their scouts and disrupt their trackers." Logan nodded, snatching the flasks. "And the king? Alden will assist me," Elora said. She turned to the Alpha King, her expression unyielding. "Can you carry a shield?" "I can carry a mountain if it keeps our son safe." Alden swore, his voice thick with raw emotion. He reached for a heavy iron-reinforced wooden shield hanging near the cabin's rear exit, stepping in front of Elora as the first volley of arrows struck the porch. "Move," Elora commanded. They burst through the back door just as the cabin's front wall collapsed in a shower of sparks. Logan vanished into the dense mist of the western ridge like a shadow. Elora, with Leo cradled against her chest, sprinted toward the steep slope of the misty ravine. The descent was treacherous, a nearly vertical 1 to 3 incline covered in wet pine needles and loose shale. Behind them, shouts of confusion echoed through the forest as Elora's spore trap activated. A thick, choking cloud of yellow-gray mist rolled through the trees, throwing Raymond's front ranks into disarray. But their commander, a scarred Lycan named Captain Varric, was not easily deterred. "They're heading for the ravine," Varric roared, his voice cutting through the fog. "Bring down the cliffside, block their path." Arrows whistled through the trees, several thudding heavily into Alden's shield. He kept himself positioned perfectly between the archers and Elora, his jaw clenched, his muscles straining against the residual fatigue of the poison. A stray arrow sliced across his shoulder, drawing a line of crimson, but he didn't even flinch. His entire focus was locked on the woman and child running before him. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the ridge. Raymond's mages had targeted the rocky overhang above the ravine path. "Look out!" Alden roared. He lunged forward, throwing his massive frame over Elora and Leo just as a deluge of shattering stone and debris rained down. He braced his shield above them, his back absorbing the impact of several heavy rocks. A low, pained groan escaped his lips, but he did not buckle. When the dust cleared, the escape path below them was completely blocked by a massive rock slide. They were trapped on a narrow, rocky ledge, with the cliffside rising steeply on one side and a sheer drop on the other. From the mist above, Captain Varric and a dozen heavily armed soldiers emerged, their swords drawn. "Yield, Alpha King." Varric sneered, stepping forward. Or we will push your pretty little witch and her bastard over the edge. Alden stood slowly, his body battered, but his posture radiating and terrifying absolute authority. He dropped his broken shield, drawing his broadsword. You will touch them only when my heart has stopped beating. But Elora was already moving. Her eyes scanned the rock slide, identifying an unstable keystone holding back a secondary deposit of loose gravel. Alden, when I say jump, you grab my hand and leap for the lower ledge. Before Varric could react, Elora whipped her dagger forward, channeling her remaining magical energy into the blade. She hurled it with perfect tactical precision. The silver-plated dagger struck the keystone at a precise 45-degree angle. The stone shattered. With a deafening roar, a second landslide triggered, sweeping Varric and his men off their feet. Jump! Elora cried. Alden grabbed her hand, his grip unyielding, and together they leapt into the blinding gray mist. They landed heavily on a narrow ledge 10 feet below, the slide of gravel carrying them safely into a hidden, moss-draped crevice in the ravine wall. Above them, the screams of Raymond's soldiers faded, replaced by the deep rumble of falling earth. But their relief was short-lived. A low whistle echoed from the mist, Logan's signal. Elora scrambled out of the crevice, her heart hammering against her ribs. Logan! From the shadows of the lower path, Logan appeared. But he was not alone. 2 of Raymond's mages had him cornered, their hands glowing with dark, violet runes. Logan fought valiantly, but a blast of magical energy struck him in the chest, throwing him against the stone wall. Before he could recover, a heavy iron collar was snapped around his neck, a magic-suppressing tether. Go! Logan roared, his eyes wide with panic as he looked toward Elora. You have to run. They're using a portal relay to bring reinforcements from the capital. They know you're here. Logan, no. Elora stepped forward, but Alden caught her by the waist, pulling her back into the shadow of the crevice. If we go out there now, we all die, Alden whispered, his voice laced with an agonizing conflict. He held her tightly, shielding her from the view of the mages, who were now dragging Logan back up the cliff. I will not lose you again, Elora. I will not lose our son. Elora watched in silent, burning agony as her foster brother was taken. She pressed her face against Leo's soft hair, the boy whimpering quietly beneath the blanket. The anger she had harbored against Alden for 2 years suddenly felt secondary to the cold, hard reality of their survival. They won't kill him, Elora whispered, her tactical mind forcing its way through the grief. Raymond needs Logan as leverage. He knows Logan is the only one who can lead him to us. They will take him back to Castle Solaria for a public trial to legitimize Raymond's regency. Then we go to the capital, Alden said, his golden brown eyes burning with a cold, absolute resolve. He looked down at his blood-stained hands, then at Elora. We end this where it began. You are in no condition to fight an army, Alden. Elora said, her voice softening slightly as she noticed the deep bruising on his back from the rock slide. I am not the same foolish boy who thought he could bargain with vipers, Alden said. He stepped closer, the space between them suddenly feeling intimate and charged. He reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of dark hair from her forehead. His touch was incredibly light, almost reverent. For 2 years, I lived in a castle that felt like a tomb. I thought my silence protected you, but it only built your prison. I will tear that castle down brick by brick to free Logan, and to earn the right to stand in your shadow. Elora looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of the proud, unreachable king who had broken her heart. She found only a man, wounded, desperate, and entirely devoted. We do not tear it down, she said, her voice returning to its steady, authoritative register. We infiltrate it. Raymond's power relies on the support of the High Lords. If we can expose Vivian's connection to the black-veined plague, the alliance will crumble from within. She pulled a small vial of the silver countertoxin from her satchel. The silver hemlock leaves a residual alchemical signature in the blood. If I can trigger a reaction with a precise 1 to 10 dilution of pure spring water and sun-dried lavender, the magic will become visible to the naked eye. It will show the world the exact magical signature of the caster who bound the curse to your bloodline. How do we get close enough to the High Council? Alden asked. Elora's lips curved into a cold, brilliant smile. The smile of the chief tactician of Solaria. Raymond wants a public trial to cement his power. We will give him exactly what he wants. The grand sanctuary of Castle Solaria was packed to the rafters. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense and the heavy, tense silence of a kingdom on the brink of civil war. At the center of the hall, Logan stood in heavy chains, his posture defiant despite the dark bruises lining his face. At the high dais sat Lord Raymond, draped in regal velvet, alongside Lady Vivian, who wore a silver tiara that should have belonged to Elora. For the crime of treason, for harboring the fugitive Alpha King and conspiring with Wildland witches. Raymond's voice boomed across the silent court. Logan of the Northern Watch is hereby sentenced to death by the Silver Blade. A murmur of protest rippled through the Northern Lords, but Raymond's guards quickly stepped forward, their swords drawn to silence the crowd. Wait! The heavy oak doors of the sanctuary swung open with a deafening crash. Through the threshold stepped Elora. She wore no armor, only a simple forest green cloak, her posture regal and unyielding. Beside her walked Alden, his dark iron crown restored to his brow, his broadsword resting sheathed at his hip. In his arms, he carried a small, sleeping boy with dark curls. The court erupted in a collective, deafening gasp. Alden! Vivian stood up, her face turning pale as she stared at the king she had believed to be dying. You are alive. I am alive, Vivian. Alden's voice echoed through the hall, rich with the deep, terrifying resonance of an Alpha King. And I have returned to reclaim my throne from the traitors who sought to steal it. Arrest them! Raymond roared, pointing a trembling finger at the doorway. They are infected with the Wildland plague. The witch has under her thrall. The only plague in this room is the one you brought from the Southern Reach, Elora said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the hall. She stepped forward, raising a small glass vial containing a glowing silver lavender liquid. My lords of Solaria, you were told the king was struck by a Wildland curse. But the black-veined plague is a controlled, alchemical toxin bound directly to his bloodline. It requires a magical anchor, a caster's mark. With a swift, fluid motion, Elora shattered the vial against the stone floor. A blinding silver-blue mist erupted from the glass, rolling across the sanctuary floor. The mist seemed drawn to a specific source, creeping up the dais and wrapping around Vivian's hands. Instantly, the silver light turned a deep, rotting black, revealing a complex runic pattern burned into the skin of Vivian's wrists. It was the caster's mark, the absolute, undeniable proof of the curse. The High Lords gasped, several of them drawing their swords and pointing them at the dais. Treason! Lord Dustin of the Western Pass roared. The Southern Reach poisoned our king. It's a lie! Vivian shrieked, her composed mask shattering as she backed away. She reached into her robes, pulling out a small black crystal, a shadow relay designed to detonate the magical wards of the castle. If I cannot have this kingdom, none of you will. But Elora had already anticipated the move. She had memorized the security protocols of the castle because she had designed them. Logan, the Western Pillar! Elora called out. Logan, realizing her plan, threw his weight against the iron chains, binding him to the pillar. The movement triggered a safety release Elora had covertly loosened during her entry. The heavy iron chain whipped forward, wrapping around Vivienne's wrist and shattering the black crystal before she could channel her magic. Raymond drew his sword, lunging at Alden in a desperate final bid for power. But Alden was ready. With a single powerful sweep of his broadsword, he disarmed the older lord, sending his weapon clattering across the stone floor. He brought the edge of his blade to Raymond's throat, his golden brown eyes burning with absolute dominance. "Yield," Alden commanded. Raymond fell to his knees, his hands trembling as he raised them in surrender. "I yield. I yield." The sanctuary fell into a profound, breathless silence. Alden turned slowly, looking at the assembled lords, then at Logan, whose chains were quickly being removed by his fellow guards. Finally, his gaze settled on Elora, who stood holding their son, her silver blue eyes reflecting the dawn light breaking through the high windows. Alden stepped down from the dais. He did not walk to the throne. Instead, he stopped directly in front of Elora. In front of the entire court, the proud Alpha King of Solaria sank to one knee, bowing his head before her. "For 2 years, I let pride and duty blind me to the only truth that ever mattered," Alden said, his voice carrying an emotional weight that brought tears to the eyes of the gathered crowd. "I do not ask for your immediate forgiveness, Elora. I only ask for the chance to earn it. The crown of Solaria is yours if you will have it. And if you choose to return to the Grey Ridge, I will abdicate this throne today, to follow you as your protector, and as Leo's father." Elora looked down at the kneeling king. She saw the scars on his back from the rocks he had taken to shield them. She saw the raw, honest devotion in his eyes. He had offered to throw away the very crown he had once sacrificed her love to keep. She reached down, her fingers gently tangling in his dark hair as she urged him to stand. "You will not abdicate, Alden," Elora said softly, a genuine, beautiful smile finally breaking through her guarded expression. "Solaria needs its king, but it also needs a strategist who can keep him from making foolish decisions." She turned to the assembly of lords, her voice ringing out with a newfound, triumphant authority. "We will rebuild this kingdom together, not as king and shadow consort, but as equals." The sanctuary erupted in a deafening cheer, a roaring celebration that echoed through the stone walls and out into the valley. Under the warm golden light of a new dawn, Alden drew Elora into his arms, his lips meeting hers in a deep, passionate kiss that sealed a new, unbroken promise under the rising sun. Elora's journey began in the deepest shadow of betrayal, but through her unwavering intelligence, resilience, and tactical brilliant mind, she did not merely survive her exile. She conquered her fate. Her story is a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in the absence of wounds, but in the courage to heal, to protect those we love, and to demand the respect we deserve. Thank you so much for embarking on this cinematic journey with us. If Elora's fierce loyalty and Alden's hard-earned redemption touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment with your favorite scene, and share it with your fellow romance lovers. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another captivating story of love, betrayal, and triumph. See you in the next adventure.